Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining tonight's virtual forum event hosted by the Institute of Politics and Public Service at the McCourt School of Public Policy, known to many Hoyas as Geopolitics. My name is Javon Price, and I'm a junior in the School of Foreign Service studying international security. Throughout my time at Georgetown, I've had the opportunity to be involved with geopolitics both formally and informally. First, as a student strategist with Michael Steele, and now as a regular attendee to countless geopolitics events. In addition to my involvement with geopolitics, I currently sit on the Hoya editorial board. I was a contributing writer to 2 publications on campus, the Georgetown Review and On the Record, and I'm a former member of the GUCR board. I'm pleased to introduce our guest tonight, Ronna McDaniel, the current chairwoman of the Republican National Committee. As chairwoman of the Republican Party, she's not only the second woman ever elected to the position, her groundbreaking election has been met with prodigious fundraising records and continuous support of the president and his agenda to keep America great. Chairwoman McDaniel, thank you so much for being here to share your perspective with us tonight. Tonight's event is co-sponsored by the Georgetown University College Republicans and the Georgetown Bipartisan Coalition. Please feel free to share your thoughts throughout the event on social media using the hashtag GU Virtual Forum and tagging @GUPolitics. I'll now hand it over to our moderator for tonight's event, Geopolitics Executive Director, Mo Alethi.
Javon, thanks so much for the introduction, and thanks so much for your leadership at Geopolitics and with so many other organizations on campus. I want to thank the Georgetown University College Republicans and the Bipartisan Coalition for joining us in putting this event together tonight. But mainly, I want to thank all of you that are tuning in, the students, the staff, the faculty that are participating in this Zoom discussion, as well as everyone from the external audience that's watching us and joining us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, where the recording of this event will be posted immediately afterwards. This is part 2 of our chats with the chairs. For those of you that tuned in on Monday night, we had Democratic National Committee Chair Tom Perez. And tonight, we're excited to continue the conversation with Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel. This is, I think, the chairwoman's second time with us at Geopolitics, last time on campus. We're looking forward to the next time being back on campus as well. And we're going to talk tonight about where the campaign stands, where Campaign 2020 stands, but primarily against the backdrop of this global pandemic that we're all struggling to deal with. Here's how the conversation is going to go. For those of you that have been participating in our other events this past few weeks, it'll be familiar to you. We're going to start the first part of the evening will be the chair and I just having a conversation. But about halfway through, we're going to invite students to join into that conversation with their questions. For those of you that are participating via Zoom, you will see at the bottom of your screen the Q&A button. Click on that, not the chat button. Click on the Q&A button to leave your question. Someone from our team will get back to you, and that's where you should look at your chat, the chat button. But they will get back to you to let you know when your time is up, or when your turn is up, and then we will invite you to ask your question. So make sure at that point that you are camera friendly, camera ready, because we're going to make you famous. And feel free to begin to populate your questions now. And so with that, let's get the conversation started. Madam Chair, thanks for coming back to Geopolitics.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for that nice introduction, Javon. And I do wish I were there with you in person, and hopefully we can do that next year.
We'll look forward to it. So the last time we chatted in one of these discussions was, I believe, not long, it was very early in the administration, very early into your tenure as chair. A lot's changed. A lot's happened since then, obviously. And so now a lot of what we talked about then was how you all were preparing for the president's reelection. We're in the middle of the campaign now, and now you know who your opponent is. So I'm wondering if you could just take a couple minutes to help frame the race for us from your perspective. Where does the race stand? How are you guys looking at it?
Well, obviously, we've been preparing, as you mentioned, since we met last time. And from a party perspective, so much of what we do is raising the money in advance, putting the ground game in place, registering voters, getting staff on the ground, and getting ready for that ultimate voter turnout on election day. Clearly, we've had a head start. We've raised record money. We've had an ability to work with the Trump campaign. We're in 23 states already with 800 staff on the ground, and we've activated about 1 million volunteers. So we're in a good position. I describe it this way for people who don't understand the party and what we do. With the bandwidth we have and the things we're able to do with data and voter reg and digital, and the fundraising limits that we have as opposed to a candidate who can only raise $2,800, we build the road so the candidates can drive on it. And that road takes years and years and years to build. And we're in the best place we've ever been heading into this election. And now we have our candidates. And in the middle of this virus, it's really hard to be running a campaign and thinking about that right now. And I think most Americans are just wanting to see us get through this crisis. And as we come out of this, you'll see more and more of how this campaign shapes up.
The other night with Chairman Perez, he sort of laid out the choice as the DNC saw it between the president and the former vice president. What is that choice as you see it?
Well, the president built an economy that was in such great shape as we headed into this unforeseen crisis. 7 million new jobs, 500,000 manufacturing jobs. This was a president that immediately understood as a candidate the threat that China posed in terms of taking on our supply chain. So much of our manufacturing had left our country. I remember him saying early on, it's a national security issue that we no longer have manufacturing in this country. What if something comes to us and we have to quickly ramp up the ability to manufacture? Well, I think Americans now see that with the ventilators that we've had to call on the private sector to build, GM and Ford, the importance and the vitality of our manufacturing being strong, and also recognizing that we can't just offload everything to China. And then the president has the case to make to the American people. I built a great economy. I took us out of a tough spot, and I can do it again. And I'm going to be the best one to get us to that correct place. And I think that's a real contrast with Biden and his stance with China, and also some of the economic policies that put us in a tough place that the president had to dig us out of.
So among the many things that the pandemic has forced political operations to deal with and adjust is messaging. And you look at the fact that you all and the Trump campaign have been very aggressive promoting his economic record. And there was some evidence that in polling that the American people gave him a net positive approval rating on his handling of the economy. But now you've seen all the economic gains, not just of his administration, but of the Obama administration pretty much wiped out. And a lot of anxiety around public health, as well as where the economy is. You began to allude to it a little bit, but I'm wondering what the message is, particularly as we start to see in polling, as we start to see trust in the president's approach on this stuff on a downward trajectory. How do you address that? How do you get them to see him as the leader you want them to see him?
Well, I do think within the polling that we're seeing, Americans still, even against Joe Biden head to head, which we're now seeing, trust the president on the economy and to build back the economy at a higher level. They recognize that we were in very strong shape. They also recognize that this crisis, this pandemic, was something that the president had no control over, and we've literally had to shutter our whole economy for the safety and health of our fellow Americans. So I think there's a lot of understanding. It's not like there was mismanagement that led to this. It was a pandemic that hit the whole globe, all 50 states declaring an emergency at one time. We've never seen anything like this. So we get to go to the American people and say, not only did he build it up once through deregulation, through cutting taxes, through recognizing what would stimulate the economy, energy independence, the things that he's done, tariffs on China, being tough on them, saying we're not going to have these trade deficits, the USMCA, better trade deals. Those are things that made us have this robust economy, and he's going to be better suited to bring us back when we come out of this. And when it comes to the virus, I think Polling has been all over the place. We've seen very high approval for him through this crisis. And I think when we get to go and put the pieces together of the steps he took, and talking about the fact that as it hit our shores, he was able to harness the private sector in a way that's allowed us to surpass every other country in testing. That's allowed us to make sure that not one person who's needed a ventilator hasn't been able to have one in this country. And you're seeing us flattening the curve because it took a whole of America approach. And you know what? He's done it with governors, Democrat governors, Republican governors across the board. And that type of bipartisanship that you see in a crisis is something that the American people want to see from their leader.
So, for the audience, full disclosure, I think most of them know that I'm a former spokesman for a national party committee on the other side.
The DNC, yeah.
And so I fully understand that trying to get everyone in your party on the same message is like herding cats. It's not an easy thing to do. But I'm wondering, in the context of this and where we are right now, and then I want to move on past message, but in the context of this, where you've got, particularly on the issue of reopening, where you've got some Republican governors pumping the brakes a little bit more aggressively than the president is in terms of wanting to, the messaging around reopening the economy. And I'm wondering, as the RNC chair, how that impacts your job, how you handle when there's maybe a little bit of division in the ranks there.
I think it aligns with a lot of what our party stands for, which is states' rights and the 10th Amendment, and the president recognizing there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to this. And so when he laid out the 3 phases to opening, he said it's going to be different, not just state by state, but county by county. I live in Wayne County in Michigan. It's one of the hardest hit counties in my state, but that's much different than Ottawa County or Kent County on the western side of my state. So having that ability to not just work with state leaders, but local leaders, and saying you are going to make the determination based on what you're seeing on the ground, what you're seeing in terms of new cases, on flattening the curve. We trust you to implement these guidelines that we're setting forward at the federal government, but you're the closest to the problem. You're going to be the ones to ultimately determine how to open this up. And I think you're seeing a wide variety of responses to that from different governors, but they're all in different situations. And we'll have a chance as a country to look and see what's working and what's not. And there may be places where you have to pull back, or states that say, okay, now we're ready to open. But I think the president recognizing there's no one size fits all, and that it's going to be done state by state, is exactly in line with what our party stands for.
Let's move to some of the more mechanics of your job. Politics, it's a people business, right? I mean, knocking on doors, talking face to face, gathering in large rallies or in big phone bank rooms. And all of that just had to shut down. But the campaign doesn't. So how do you, as a national party, how have you adjusted to sort of trying to maintain the sense of community and personal connection in a socially isolated world?
Well, I'll tell you, for different people, and Mo, you would get this, different people within the RNC, they're adjusting differently. I'm a social person. I love people. I love campaigning. It's been hard to be so isolated. And then some of our folks at the RNC love it. They're like, this is great. I get to not have to interact with folks. But we quickly recognized that we had to shift our strategy. So much of what we had built was based on door knocking, and the recognition that the way you change a voter's mind most often is most effective by talking to them face to face and knocking that door and having that conversation with your neighbor or your friend or somebody you go to church with or to school with. So having to shut that down, we flipped it to a virtual operation within about 24 hours. I talked to Chris Carr, who's our political director, and we kind of mapped that out. And we actually had a day of action planned to go knock doors across the country. The states compete. It's very fun. And we flipped it to a virtual day of action, and we contacted 1.5 million voters that first virtual day of action. So that is exceptionally successful. We've actually added 300,000 new volunteers. So everything we're doing is through Zoom or Microsoft Meetings or Skype. We're just connecting all over the place. And I think that's so important that we have those connections. And you know what, Mo? Everyone's home. So they're responding and they want to talk more. And it is an interesting change and a shift, but I don't feel like we've lost any ground. But I am looking forward to getting back to knocking doors. I hope we get to that place where we can interact with each other socially again.
So for someone who's not as familiar with some of this as you and I are, right? Like they can wrap their heads around knocking on a door, right? What does it mean to transition it to digital? Like what is the equivalent of knocking on a door in a neighborhood?
So because of the rallies and how much data we gather at the rallies and how much data we have on voters, we knew who our non-registered voters were. We know where our swing voters are. So instead of knocking on that door, I'm knocking on your Zoom, I'm knocking on your email, and I'm saying, hey, initially the messaging was all about coronavirus. We just want to check on you. Are you doing okay? Can we give you the resources you need? Because that's where the whole country was. So we wanted to make it more of a just a check-in and make sure.
Not even really a political message.
It wasn't political. It really wasn't. In fact, one of our volunteers in Florida, and I've shared this a couple times, hooked up with a woman, Shirley. She couldn't leave her home. She was elderly. Her husband was a veteran with Parkinson's, and he ended up finding out she needed groceries. He ended up getting her groceries. And those are the types of things. One of our volunteers would make his calls and then he'd go mow lawns for people who couldn't get out and mow their lawn in states that you can do that. My state's not one of those. So those are the types of things that we've seen through these connections and more relationships being built. And with people actually answering their phones now, which before we were so busy, we had our lives. Now people actually are connecting in a different way than that door knock. But it is very impactful.
One of the things all of my former colleagues in politics, as we were making this transition to digital, we were like, man, I would hate to be a fundraiser in this environment because that's the last thing on people's minds. Everyone's worried about their health, they're worried about their livelihood, the stock market's taking a hit. Who's going to write these big checks? Apparently a lot of your donors are, because you guys just had a record month, right? Talk to me a little bit about how you're doing that.
Well, to be honest, a lot of our month started off early, really well, because remember we shut down. I remember because it was like March 12th, really, that the whole world changed. And I actually was sick, so I was getting a test March 14th. It luckily turned out negative, and that was our last fundraiser, but I had just come off of a full weekend and a day of fundraising with the president. So that helped fuel our March. On the major fundraising side, we don't have events right now. The president's not interested in that, to be candid. He's focused on our country. He's not talking to me about how do I go out and fundraise, and it wouldn't be appropriate to be talking about that anyway. And neither is the family, neither is the First Lady doing events or virtual events right now. But except for, Kimberly, who's doing the small dollar fundraising for the campaign. But we did build a strong digital operation early on. So when I became chair, we had about 11 million emails. And we made a decision, and it was a tough decision, that we were going to invest millions and millions of dollars in expanding our email list. So we took it from 11 to close to over 30. It took about $30 million. I think we're almost 40 now between emails and SMS. And that has become a fuel for our small dollar engine. And that has been incredibly strong throughout this, as well as our mail fundraising. And really my calls right now on the major side are just check-in calls. I haven't been asking for donations at this point because so many people are laying off employees or losing their companies, or they have loved ones who are sick. And it's just not the right time still for me.
Yeah. So much of the political mystique, I think, around this president are his rallies, right? I mean, the guy lives for him. I think anyone on the political spectrum would tell that's pretty evident. The chances of there being sort of that level of in-person gathering anytime soon is pretty remote. And what I've always found interesting as a political operative is those rallies are important, not just because of the messaging, not just because of the energy, but it's also a great place to get a lot of data, right, from everyone who walks through those doors. So you don't have any of that now. How is that impacting the campaign or making you think maybe a little bit differently about what you do next?
Well, clearly we had a lot of rallies, so we had been collecting a lot of data. And that is one advantage we have over Joe Biden, because he just got the nomination and is prevented from collecting that data and having those rallies too. So that head start's helping us. I hope we get to a place where we can have rallies again, but these virtual Zoom meetings, we will get to virtual fundraising. Those are ways to connect, and we're gonna do what's right for the times. I do think as we are opening up, we are also going to see more and more tests. We're going to see more innovation. We're going to get to a better place. Every month that we get through this, we're already seeing more testing at 5 million. I've talked to people who've said in a couple months, I'll have a huge amount of tests available. So there are things happening simultaneously as we're opening up on the medical front that I think will put us in a better place. But we'll see. I mean, this is all wait and see. We don't know. So we'll be adjusting accordingly.
Which brings us to sort of the ultimate rally, the convention at the end of August. We've already seen how it's impacted the DNC. They were supposed to go, I guess, about 5 or 6 weeks before the RNC in mid-July. They've now pushed it back to late August, so it's the week right before yours is scheduled. Talk about like what you're thinking right now is around a convention, and what you do if you're not able to move forward with it as we've always known them to look like.
So we're full steam ahead planning a traditional convention. Our convention's at the end of August. I think it would be way too early to make a determination to cancel or do anything other than plan a full convention. We'll see where we are. I'd say by the end of June, early July, we'll make a determination at that point if there's something that's changed on the ground. But we're hoping to be fully ready to hold that convention in August. It's critical to nominate our candidate. And actually, Mo, it's hard to run a convention. The staging, the money you have to raise, the accommodations for 50,000 people coming into the city of Charlotte, which has just been such a great city to work with, and we're so excited to host this. So actually, if we did have to switch to a different type of convention, it'd be much easier. So we can't take our foot off the gas on the preparations towards this convention. But really, the build out doesn't begin until July anyway. So we'll be looking at circumstances at the end of June and July. But right now, full steam.
That's when you expect to make a determination. Because you're right. It's not like you can wait till the first week of August and say, or say, we'll see where things stand in the middle of August.
Yeah. So we have May and July to see how we come out. I mean, we're still in the middle of April. So you've got May and July. You have states that are starting to open. I think we'll have a lot better information in 2 months than we do now. And there's no need to make a decision right now. We do, based on our bylaws, have to have an in-person convention. So we will not be having a virtual convention. There will be an in-person convention.
Have you given thought to what that looks like under different scenarios, though?
I haven't, because I just think in June, if we come to that place, we'll be fine and have enough time to shift that if we need to.
And I guess one last question on this. There is a scenario where, the state of North Carolina says it's not ready to have large-scale gatherings. And if they say that, but the president believes otherwise, how do you guys navigate that?
Well, why would you ask me a question like that, Mo?
A lot of people are wondering.
Think about that scenario. I'm not even thinking about that. As I said, first of all, it's going to be a partnership. And if the state of North Carolina is in a position that they're saying we can't hold your convention, then that means they're canceling every other convention coming to downtown Charlotte and to the state. And they want to, as we do. So we are confident. We feel good that we will all be in unison as this decision is made.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I don't think there's anything Charlotte would want more, the state of North Carolina would want more than to be able to actually host the convention. It's good for them, it's good for business.
But they lost the All-Star game too.
The question.
Yeah, they've lost a lot of revenue, these cities, so they want to have it open.
That's right. Just trying to make a little news here, Madam.
We are full steam ahead. No canceling of convention. Okay. That's the news.
All right. We're going to move soon to the student questions. And so, students, this is a good time. If you haven't yet, go ahead and submit your question at the bottom in the Q&A, under the Q&A tab. But before we do that, one of the other big issues that has come up in recent weeks as it pertains to how this crisis is affecting politics is how it's affecting voting, not just the campaigns, but how people are voting. And probably no bigger example than the Wisconsin primary a couple weeks ago, where there was a big fight over whether or not the in-person primary should move forward. Both the RNC and DNC have been equally, I think, aggressive in their positions on how to move forward with voting and the role of vote by mail. And both parties have been using the same frame, election integrity, which I find fascinating because you're in very different places on this. So I'm wondering if you can share your position.
Absolutely. So every state has accommodations for absentee voting, for our military personnel, for people who are elderly, for people who can't make it to the ballot. Every single state has that. What we have challenged, for example, when the DNC went into Wisconsin and started a lawsuit there, we came in and joined that lawsuit, or when they said we want to take away the safeguards of voter identification for absentee ballots, which was part of Wisconsin law. And that's what got us engaged in that. And then when the court said, well, we're just going to leave the election open for 6 days, we pushed back on that. So as governors are changing election dates, we don't get involved in that. We just don't subscribe to pulling off safeguards or things that help maintain election integrity, like the ID portion of the Wisconsin law. So that's where we got involved. Now, all mail-in voting, this is what we keep hearing about. You hear Nancy Pelosi and many Democrats saying we should nationalize mail voting and make it across the country. And I really think that would leave a lot of problems. A lot of states have already put mechanisms in place to safeguard their election. And you look at Hickenlooper in Colorado, for example. He talks about how it took years to implement. They have ballot tracing. They audit their voter rolls. They make sure they have signature requirements. So they thought about it and put it together in a way that worked for the state and took years and years to implement. I just do not think you can nationalize mail-in voting with states that have very, very different ways of ensuring election integrity in 5 or 6 short months.
So some of the arguments on the other side include, number one, that especially in this moment, we shouldn't be putting states in a position or citizens in a position where they have to choose between public health and their constitutional right to vote. And so we need to make it easier. We need to expand the number of opportunities and mechanisms that people have. And I think, what Tom Perez said the other night was not pushing for 100% mail voting. He was saying it should just be one of the options every voter has available to them in every state. So what's your response to that?
Well, I think there's some real differences in what you're seeing in the lawsuits we're engaging in. So many of the suits that were in like New Mexico, they wanted to just send ballots, not absentee request forms. Okay, so I struggle with just sending ballots to voters. For example, in California, they had 112% registration. They had 1.5 million more people registered to vote than they had adults in the state because they had not cleaned up their voter rolls. And what does it mean to clean up a voter roll? It doesn't mean purging. It doesn't mean putting people off. It's saying, have you moved out of the state? Has this person passed away? I do not like the idea of 1.5 million just ballots being out there without knowing that it's going to the person that's intended and that they actually live in the state. In Nevada, for example, they do something called inactive voters. How do you become an inactive voter in Nevada? You become an inactive voter when the post office says to the state, this person has moved away, and then they mail that person to say, do you still live here? Do you still live here? Because we're going to label you an inactive voter, and they don't get a response. So there's about 250,000 of those voters in Nevada, those inactive voters. Well, the DNC or the Democrat Party just came in and said, we want to mail ballots to all the inactive voters. I don't think ballots should just go out. Now, absentee request forms are very different than actual ballots. And that's where a lot of the difference in language is. And I have a real concern about election integrity when there are 1.5 million extra ballots in California or 250,000 extra ballots in Nevada.
In fact, I think I just read, so my facts may be just a little off, but just as we were getting ready to log on to this, down in Florida, in South Florida, a number of counties have just decided, I believe, that they're just going to send absentee ballots to all their voters now in order to give them that opportunity.
Ballots or ballot requests?
It's a good question. I don't know.
So if you listen to the news a lot, they don't make the distinction. And I think that's where a lot of the differences are. I don't mind people being sent absentee ballot request forms. That's okay. Give them the opportunity to vote by mail. We're not fighting those, and we're not in lawsuits and those things. I struggle with just sending out ballots, especially in states that haven't taken the time to audit their voter roll, make sure that people who have moved away from the state aren't getting a ballot, and taking that extra step to ensure the integrity of the election. And I think that's really a reasonable stance. And I would say most Americans want that. And if you look at Colorado and Washington, they do exactly that. These are states that are mail-in voting, and they have said, we audit it, we make sure we have ballot tracing, we have signature matching. They've put a lot of safeguards in place, and they've done it thoughtfully at the state level. I do not think a national imposed mail-in process is something that's going to cause a lot of it's going to cause a lot of angst for a lot of voters across this country.
A lot of Republicans, including the president, have raised concerns or have alleged that there was widespread voter fraud associated with mail-in voting, and a few, not everyone, but a few have made a more political argument that that's bad for Republicans. Democrats kind of push back, say there is no evidence of widespread voter fraud. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I do think there's an opportunity for voter fraud if you have 1.5 million ballots being sent, 1.5 million ballots being sent in California to voters who no longer live there. That's a concern, I think. And the president obviously wants everyone who should be able to vote to be able to vote. And anybody who shouldn't be able to vote shouldn't be able to vote. So we've got to balance those safeguards in part of that election integrity. And the president has not said, let's get rid of absentee ballots. He's saying, we don't want to have a national mail program run by the federal government. Let's keep it at the state level. And many of these states, every state has an absentee ability, and let them keep the safeguards in place that they've put in place to keep that election integrity, and let the voters have confidence in the process. You know, it's so uncertain right now. Why would we want to dismantle our confidence in the election process heading into this important election?
Okay. I have more questions for you. I may sprinkle them in throughout,
okay.
But let's get to the students who always ask better questions than I do anyway. As I call on each of you, please tell us who you are, where you're zooming in from, what school you are, class, all that good stuff, and try to keep your questions in the form of a question. So with that, first up is Daniel. Daniel, you with us?
I'm here.
Hey, Daniel.
Okay, great.
Hi, Chairwoman McDaniel. Thank you for being here and speaking to us. My name is Daniel Rogov, and I'm from New York City, and I'm a freshman in the college.
Okay.
My question to you is, what do you think will be the largest change in the president's re-election strategy due to the pandemic?
Well, obviously, we've seen a lot of that with the rallies not happening. And I'll tell you, the president is so focused on how do we get this country working again? How do we keep people safe and healthy that he's not thinking about the campaign? So we're dealing with not really having a candidate right now in some ways where, you know, Joe Biden is campaigning and he's holding virtual fundraisers. So that is a little bit of a difference because now we have a president versus a candidate. So it does limit the time and changes the message. So the one benefit we have is we get to go and say, these are the things this president ran on, and here are the things he did. Better trade deals. Obviously, we had a robust economy, recognizing that we needed to bring manufacturing back to this country. On many of the issues he ran on, he's delivered. So we get to take that to the public during this crisis. But it is a little bit of a challenge to not have a candidate right now out campaigning. I'm glad. I want him to do what he's doing. I think he shouldn't be campaigning, but it does change the landscape. Thank you for that question, Daniel.
What's your surrogate operation like now? Do you have folks who are trying to step up in his absence, or is everybody kind of holding back because of what we're doing?
I think, well, one, we're also, abiding by the guidelines. So we're all transitioning to our new normals.
Right.
And so, we've been holding a lot of trainings. Kimberly and Don Jr. have done a lot of that. Laura Trump obviously is involved in the campaign. So that's been going on, but not at the level that it would be in a full-fledged campaign. And I think past May 1st, we'll get a little bit more that way. The first 2 weeks, it was just shell shock for everybody. And I think now we're starting to see hope, and hopefully we get to a place as this curve is flattening that we can campaign. Isn't that a sad thing that we want to campaign? But that'll mean that our country's healing, and it'll be good in the long term. And of course, the election's not going away, so we will have to inevitably get to that point.
Okay, next up, Grace. Hey, Grace.
Hi, Grace.
Hi, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. My question's kind of two-part, and you can take it in whatever direction you want. But looking back on the past 4 years, what are the most significant ways in which President Trump has shaped the Republican Party? And kind of looking forward, like 4 years, what do you think the Republican primary field would look like?
Those are really great questions. So I was chair of the Michigan Republican Party before I became chair of the RNC. And the one thing that President Trump did for our party that I hadn't seen is he brought in a whole new constituency into our party, which are working class Americans, especially in Macomb County in my state, who felt like Washington didn't care about them, that politicians didn't care about them, their wages had stagnated. They were hard-working Americans. And before they would have been labeled these Reagan Democrats. And they really flipped for President Trump. So on top of the traditional Republicans that he had, he brought up a whole slew of people who had previously been Democrats. And that's really expanded our party and changed us into a party that's more in line with the working class, which before it wasn't that way. So he's broadened our party significantly on that front. Going forward, there's a whole host of people I think will be running in 2024 for president on the Republican side. And you can see them starting to shape up. I mean, Mo knows who's taking that first trip to Iowa, who's nicest to me. No, I'm just kidding. But, you start to really feel for that field. But for me, everything's about November. So I'm not even thinking about 2024. But I think we'll have a great field of candidates when we get to that point. Thank you, Grace.
Before we go to the next one, you referenced your time as chair of the Michigan State Party. And I'm just wondering, how are state parties faring these days? I mean, they've got a different job than the national party and different challenges. And I'm just wondering how the pandemic is affecting them.
Well, I have a passion for state parties, being a former state party chair. So it's good because I can really know if that state party is doing their job. We created a GROW program to help our state parties focus on fundraising, expanding their digital operations and their email operations. And we've really seen that ramp up with the state parties. They're doing very, very well. We are transferring money to our battleground state parties to keep those operations up and running. But they've been instrumental. A lot of our news that we get into these battleground states are through our regional comms people and our state parties and those partnerships. So I feel like that the state parties with the RNC are as robust as ever. And if they're not, then I'll call and say, how can I help?
Oh, I'm sure that you won't have to wait to get a call from that if you're not feeling robust. Okay, next up. And remember, students, tell us who you are, your school, your year, major, and where you're zooming in from. Okay, Matt.
Hi, Chairwoman McDaniel. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us. I'm a grad student pursuing a master's in public policy as well as an MBA, and I'm currently in Arlington. So my question's similar to the one before, but more focused on policies. President Trump has introduced a lot of policy changes that are departures from past kind of traditional GOP stances. So things like changes to free trade policies and increases in deficit spending come to mind. I'm curious how you think changes like these have influenced the long-term policy platform of the GOP beyond this presidency.
So I get asked that question a lot, which is, has the president fundamentally transformed the Republican Party on a policy standpoint, which is I disagree with in a lot of ways, because if you look at the judges, they've been in line. I think that was one of the things people were concerned about when he was a candidate. Who's he going to appoint to the Supreme Court? What type of judges? They've been rule of law judges, conservative on the Second Amendment, on pro-life, on deregulation, on energy independence. I mean, on issue after issue, he's in line with Republicans. Where you did see the difference is trade, and you did see some departure within our party on that. But I think the president, in hindsight now, people look back and say, boy, was he right to be tough on China. We hadn't, on both parties, been tough enough on China, as we had this $500 billion deficit, and we were allowing our country to engage in trade deals that were not beneficial, trade deals that had not been renegotiated like NAFTA for decades and decades and decades, that clearly needed to be revamped. So he was not necessarily against trade. He said we should have fair trade. And I think that's part of free trade, is that we should be fair and we shouldn't have this imbalance. And so he pulled out of some of the multilateral trade deals and went into more of a bilateral situation like TPP. And I think it's benefited our country overall. And I think it'll be something that you will see a difference in our party. Listen, we have two parties in this country. That's it. I mean, we have independents too, and Green Party and Libertarian, but for the most part, two parties. I think it's good to have diversity within your party. I think it's good to have a discussion on certain issues. And you can agree and disagree, and you can have some departures. But as Reagan said, you know, if you agree with me 80% of the time, I think it's Reagan, you're my friend, not my enemy. And I agree with that. I want people to be part of our party. You don't have to be with me 100% in lockstep. We want you. If you see things you agree with or that you want to change, help us become a better party. And I think that's one of the things that the president has done, is help us expand into different areas where our party hadn't been before. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Next up. Thanks for the question, Matt. Next, Brady.
Hi, Brady.
Good evening, Chairwoman McDaniel. Thank you so much for speaking with us. It's been a pleasure. I'm a sophomore in the School of Foreign Service coming out of New York City.
Okay.
So my question to you tonight is, as a Republican and as a fan of the work your party has done, what steps do you see in the future for the Republican Party to take its message into cities? And what options do you see for the party to become more competitive in those areas? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Brady. And thanks for being a Republican in New York. Yay! Listen, I'm passionate about this. I was passionate about when I was Michigan chair. Our party for too long has not gone into communities that have not heard our message enough. And you cannot get votes you don't ask for. And with this president, what he's done for HBCUs, loan forgiveness, what he's done with criminal justice reform and the First Steps Act. I mean, there's just so many things that we can tout. The record low unemployment in the African-American community, on top of the Latino community. There's so many great things that we can talk about, but you can't talk about them if you don't show up. So when I was chair in Michigan, we had an office in Detroit. We were there all year round. It wasn't like we just set up shop before an election and, hey, we want your vote and we're going to just show up before an election. That's not how it works. And so being part of the community and having job fairs and breakfast with the pastors and Juneteenth events and being part of the community long term, after 3 years being in Detroit, it was a different circumstance. People said, hey, there's the Republicans or there's the chair than when we first got there. And you know what? It makes us a better party. It makes us a better party when we are representing or when we are in these communities hearing from the people that we don't always represent because of redistricting. We don't represent many of these communities. So it's up to the party to be in these communities long term. And I'll just give one quick story. We talk about skilled trades all the time. Skilled trades. Everybody talks about this. Oh, we had to ramp it up. I did an event in Detroit, a roundtable, and one woman raised her hand. She said, you talk about skilled trades and how we've got to get these jobs. We can't get to the jobs because getting a driver's license in Michigan and the insurance in Michigan and driver's training in Michigan is too expensive. And you don't talk about how we're going to get to the job because we don't have public transport. So I got to take that to my governor, who was a Republican at the time, and say, have you ever heard this? You talk about skilled trades all the time. Have you ever heard anybody say this? He said, no, I hadn't. That's how we become a better party. It's not just about going and saying, how do we get your vote? It's saying, how do we represent you better? And how do we listen? And so we've opened urban offices this year for the first time ever, the Trump campaign 16. And we're going to continue to expand our footprint in every community long term. And we may not win these communities, but we're showing up. We're not going to keep just ceding ground and saying we don't care, because we do care. And we are a party that represents everybody. Sorry, I had to rant.
No. Great. Thank you, Brady. We've got maybe just about 10 minutes left. And so I know you've got a hard stop. So I want to make sure that we try to get in at least a couple more. Ryan, you're up next.
Hi, Ryan.
Good evening, Chairwoman McDaniel. Thank you for speaking to us today. I'm a sophomore in the SFS at Georgetown, and my question actually builds off of the story you just told. Given the 11 different gubernatorial races going on in 2020 and all the different situations governors are dealing with across the nation, how do you, the president, and the RNC expect to support those races going forward with the pandemic?
So that's a really great question. Obviously, and Mo knows this well, you have different committees. You have the Republican Governors Association that deals with governors, the NRCC that deals with congressional races, the Senatorial Committee for Senate, and then the RNC is kind of all-encompassing. So the way we support these races is we build out the ground game. We're kind of the tactical arm of the party as we're figuring out how we're going to get out the vote and register voters and turning out voters for the whole ballot up and down the ticket. We help those governors. Now, we may not be in every single one of those races, but where they're in conjunction with the president or a Senate race or House races, we're working together to turn out the vote. So that's how we'll be supporting these governors. Governors are critical. We're seeing that now. I'm seeing it in my state. We're having some, differences of opinions on some things. But it's so critical that we have Republican governors, and that's going to be something that's going to be focused on, as well as keeping the Senate. We have a lot of Senate races that are very competitive on the Republican side. And then we have a goal to win back the House, and it's going to take 18 seats to win back the House. So those are things that we'll be focusing on in tandem with our sister committees.
I'm hearing a lot of concern on both sides of the aisle from some of those down ballot races, particularly the further down the ballot, congressional candidates, state legislative candidates who just, there's no oxygen right now for their message to get out, given everything that's happening. How much does that concern you in some of your down ballot races?
Yeah, I've been hearing that concern from Joe Biden too. No, just kidding. I'm just kidding. I just had to do that, Mo. I'm sorry. It is hard for these down ballot candidates to raise money. And one of the things coming out of 2018, where we had this huge differential in what Democrats could raise with Act Blue, which has just been a juggernaut of small dollar fundraising for Democrat candidates at the state level too, where they can conduit with other candidates and raise money into their race. We created Win Red, and it's in its first year, but it's been very impactful, and now it's expanded to the state level. So it will allow those candidates a platform to create a conduit page with maybe their senator or their local or their congressional delegation or other candidates, so that they can piggyback off of each other or upsell and raise more money. But it has been very hard for these candidates. I do think incumbents are being favored right now because they are able to get on TV, they are dealing with the issue, and they're having more of an opportunity to speak to their voters, and those challengers are having a little bit of a harder time getting that same airtime.
Yeah. Okay, Alexander.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Hi, Alexander.
So my question is, do you see more states being in play this election cycle? And if so, which states? I know you're from Michigan, so you obviously you're a part of what used to be the blue wall. So
I do. I think that, from my standpoint, because of the early fundraising we've had record fundraising. We just raised $24 million in March, which was a record. We reported $212 million the first quarter, and we have over $200 million cash on hand between the Trump campaign and the RNC. So that's given us an advantage. Plus, we're already in 23 states with 800 staff on the ground. So that's given us an advantage to expand the map and not expand it in a superficial way, in a meaningful way. So states like Minnesota, where the president lost by 45,000 votes, New Hampshire by 3,000. There are absolutely states that are in play that weren't, but we're going to compete there. And as we expand the map, if our opponent doesn't have the same time to build this infrastructure, you can't just build a volunteer base and a staff in a day. These are the things that take months and months and months and time, interviewing, putting a ground game together, getting the right people who can deal with the county chairs and get out the vote and understand the district. So these are things that are instrumental in turning out the vote, especially when you're winning in the margins. Now, if you're losing by 10 points, I don't care what infrastructure you put in place. There's something wrong with the candidate or the message. But on these states where we lost by the margin in the margins, we absolutely are going to put these states in play. Nevada would be another one.
So Democrats think that their best shot at flipping Trump states their direction are the three blue wall: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and they add Arizona.
Yeah.
You are looking at Nevada, New Hampshire, and you said Minnesota as the three most ripe to flip your way?
Yes.
Okay.
I would agree.
Okay.
There's going to be a lot of battleground states. There's going to be a lot.
Yeah, and I suspect it's just given what's happening in the world right now, a lot of the dynamics will continue to shift in a number of states. Javon, welcome back.
Hello. Hi, Chairwoman. Really quickly, I just wanted to ask, I've been noticing the president, or I watched the president's Corona task force briefings that he has, his daily briefings with him and the rest of his staff, including the vice president. The biggest question I have is, has that served as kind of like a substitute for maybe his rallies and the success that we've seen? I think the president has performed really well, and I think a lot of Republicans, we can all agree that he's done very well in informing the American people. So I didn't wonder if there's any success correlated with his press briefings and the information and the job he's doing for the American people. Thanks,
Javon. You know, I hear that. Is this the new rally? I don't view it that way. I like the rally because we're talking about the campaign. This is the president trying to give information in real time to the American people who are really afraid. You know, I don't want to take focus of the fact that we have a country that's suffering right now. I've had friends who've passed away from this virus. I have friends who've lost their jobs. I have friends who are going to lose their businesses. It is a frightening time for our country. And so to have the president of the United States stand up with the scientists and say, here's where we are on antibody testing. Here we are on PPE. Here we are on ventilators. I think it's critical. Now, the Q&A after the fact does turn political. And that's because you have the media in there, and it's going to get that way. And the president's willing to take questions. But in terms of what our commander is doing in a time of crisis, when people need to be calmed and reassured and have the facts, I think it's so important that he's getting on TV every day. But they're not rallies. These are ways that we can cope through a really, really difficult time that our country's facing. And really, we need to all come together. I want the president to be successful, and I want my governor to be successful. She's not a Republican. I want her to succeed more than anybody. I want every state to open and be healthy. I want everybody to succeed. I'm not looking for anyone to fail based on their partisanship. This is a time where we should all be rooting for every politician and every leader and hope that they have the best resources and information as they're navigating this totally difficult time for our country.
We're just about out of time. And so I want to wrap up with one last question, and it was the same last question that I asked Tom Perez the other night. This is that time of year when college students start to feel a lot of anxiety, right? What's my summer internship going to be? Or if I'm graduating, what's my first job? And, you know, most years my office hours are full of students who are like, I want to go work on a campaign. I don't know how to do it. This year, that anxiety level for those that want to get involved in politics is much, much higher. Students who come in and say, I want to get involved, but I don't even know how. So what would you say to those young people that want to get involved in a Republican campaign this year, wherever it is on the ticket, as to how they can get involved, how they can have an impact in politics against this backdrop?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I feel for your angst because my brother, who's in college, much younger than me, he just lost his internship, and I have a junior in high school who's thinking, how is this going to affect my college applications when the standardized tests are gone? And there's a lot of angst for you guys. Thank you for what you do. I appreciate you. And Mo, I also want to give a shout out to the teachers too. I think about my kids' teachers right now, who are with their own kids, dealing with them at home and trying to navigate that, and now teaching my kids at home because I do not have the capacity although, I may seem brilliant to teach pre-calc to a 17-year-old, but I'm so appreciative of the teachers and the virtual school that's going on. I would recommend find a candidate you believe in. I always say this, no matter what level it is, find a candidate you believe in and figure out a way to get involved with them in the virtual way. On the GOP website, there's a volunteer tab. You can get involved that way. As I said, we've added 300,000 new volunteers. I just did a TVLI, we call it a Trump Victory Leadership training in New Hampshire tonight. We had a Zoom call with hundreds of individuals. We help train them. We teach them how to get engaged. But learn the mechanics and get involved and get passionate. And there's a lot of ways to get involved right now virtually, and you're going to learn some skills that maybe you wouldn't have expected, but will be beneficial along the way. Because I think most of us, I don't know, I didn't know about Zoom before all this. And I'll just end by saying I got involved in politics really young. My mom was taking me to campaigns, but I first worked on her Senate campaign as her driver. And the experience that I had being involved in that campaign and hearing the strategy firsthand and dealing with all the things that a candidate has to deal with and seeing the emotion of her team as she didn't win that race, but we became a family. And when you believe in a candidate, it can change your world. And these people make a difference. They impact our lives. Look at the decisions they're making right now. So learn about it, get involved, and then you know what? Go run for office, because we need good people to run for office.
Amen to that. We've got bipartisan agreement on that point. Madam Chair, thanks so much for coming back to the Institute of Politics and Public Service. We'll look forward to the next time being in person again. Yes. And to all of you that tuned in, thank you for spending part of your evening with us. We've got one more big event this semester before finals with someone that the chair knows, I'd say very well. Next Tuesday, we'll be hosting a conversation with Senator Mitt Romney.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, talking about American leadership during a time of crisis.
Say hi to Uncle Mitt for me.
We will. And so that'll be our last event of the semester, but given that we'll all be kind of living on Zoom anyway, once you all are done with finals, stay tuned. We'll be back with a full summer of programming as well. So on behalf of the Institute of Politics and Public Service, the McCourt School, Georgetown, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to all of you.